Another year, another OnePlus flagship smartphone. Are its cameras any better than their predecessor, or are they even that different? Hey guys, it's Sagar, and in this video, we are going to take a very detailed look at all the cameras on this OnePlus 10 Pro. This phone still focuses on the camera, and OnePlus is still working with Hasselblad, but unlike last year, they are not hyping up this partnership all that much, which is a good and bad thing. Good because no unnecessary hype keeps the user's expectations in check, and bad because no hype might also mean that somewhere along the line, either OnePlus or Hasselblad lost the trust in this collaboration. I hope this is not the case, and I will try and focus on the good here. Now the cameras on the OnePlus 9 Pro were good. All they lacked was a bit of consistency, and let's hope that OnePlus has found it with the OnePlus 10 Pro. The camera module on this phone is significantly different than the one on the OnePlus 9 Pro. It borrows bits of the design from the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra, but then by extending the camera island all the way, it tries to create its own design language. I didn't like the design when I first saw it in the renders, but now that I have it in my hand, it doesn't look all that bad. I still don't like the shiny finish to the whole module, and I think it would have looked much better in matte. Now we are going to look at the specs of all the cameras on this phone. If you guys want to skip over this part, you can head straight to the image and video samples from the chapters on the timeline of this video. There are 4 cameras on this phone, 3 at the back and 1 at the front. This is 1 less than on the OnePlus 9 Pro, and it is also missing one key feature which I will get to in a minute. This 4th circle is the dual LED ring type flash. Primary camera gets a 48 megapixel Sony IMX789 sensor with f1.8 aperture and 23mm focal length. It has a 7-element lens and optical image stabilization, and yes, it's the same one as the main camera on the OnePlus 9 Pro. Next up, there is a 50 megapixel Samsung JN1 sensor with f2.2 aperture and 14mm ultra-wide angle lens with 150 degree field of view. Now this is a downgrade over the 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor behind the ultra-wide angle lens on the OnePlus 9 Pro. On top of that, this one doesn't even have the macro capabilities, which is a shame since the macro mode on the 9 Pro was really good and everyone was hoping that it would get even better this year. Then there is an 8 megapixel sensor with f2.4 aperture and 3.3x optical magnification. This telephoto camera also gets optical image stabilization. At the front, we finally get a new 32 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture, but this one is still limited at shooting 1080p 30fps videos. In some ways, the cameras on this OnePlus 10 Pro are looking like a downgrade over last year's OnePlus 9 Pro, at least on paper. If I am not wrong, a newer generation device is supposed to be doing things better, or at the very least, keep them the same. But in this case, we see a few downgrades, which is a bit unusual. Anyways, let's hope that the resulting images are at least an improvement over the last year. Interface of the camera app is similar to what we saw last year. There are a couple of new options like the 150 degree mode, which lets you shoot ultra wide angle shots, and the expand mode, which I am not sure how many people are really going to use. What I feel more people will turn towards is the Hasselblad Pro mode, which lets you adjust all the camera settings according to your liking. The range for ISO in this mode is from 100 to 6400, and the range for shutter speed is from 1/8000th of a second all the way up to 32 seconds. There is also a new movie mode which will let you adjust all these settings while shooting videos as well. I must agree, this is a very nice addition to the camera app. In almost all the camera reviews about OnePlus smartphones, I have been complaining about the shutter lag, and I am finally happy to tell you that OnePlus seems to have fixed it on this 10 Pro. You will no longer have to wait some time between 2 shots. You can continue taking shots at your own pace and the phone finally keeps up. With that, we should be heading over to the image and video samples. But before that, if you are new to this channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon next to it. That way, you won't miss out on any of the amazing videos coming up on this channel. Normally we begin with the image samples, but for OnePlus smartphones, I like to start with the videos. The main camera can shoot 8K videos in 24fps, which if you don't know is the wrong frame rate. It should have been 30fps like on the OnePlus 9 Pro. These videos look good and detailed, but they take up a lot of storage space, and I'm sure 99% of the people getting this phone won't have an 8K display to view them on. So unless you plan on cropping way in on these videos later on, it is best to stick with the 4K videos. You can shoot 4K videos at 120fps, and this is one of my favorite features of this phone. These videos will play back at normal speed in the Galleries app. If you want to play them in slow motion, you will have to either edit them or lower the speed on the phone, or do it in your video editing software like I did with these clips. I think this 4K 120fps videos only get OIS and no EIS because these videos are not cropped in as 4K 60 and 30fps videos, which get both OIS and EIS. Here is how the 4K 60fps video looks from the main camera. As you can see, these videos are very stable and there are no weird jitters or cello-like effect with each step like we see from some of the other Android phones. This time, The ultra-wide-angle camera can only shoot 4K videos at 30 fps, so you won't be able to take 4K 60 or 8K 30 fps videos with it like you could do with the OnePlus 9 Pro last year. That being said, 4K 30 fps videos also look very good from this ultra-wide-angle lens, and it will give you a completely different perspective of the scene. I don't shoot too many videos with the telephoto lens. This camera is sadly limited to 1080p videos. The sensor behind this lens isn't big enough to shoot 4K videos. So although 10 Pro lacks some resolution and frame rate options compared to its predecessor, I still enjoy taking videos with this phone, and I am sure you would too if you decide to get it. I used all the cameras on this phone in very hot sun for a long time, and even while shooting 4K 120fps videos, this phone did not give me an overheating warning like the OnePlus 9 Pro did last year. The phone was actually getting very hot, but even then I was able to use the camera in any mode, resolution and frame rate that I wanted, which is really nice. With that, let us now move on to the images, and we will begin with the ones which I took in bright daytime. I took these images on a sunny day in peak summer, which are pretty much ideal conditions for any smartphone's camera. And it's no surprise that these images look really good and incredibly detailed. There is a bit of extra sharpening being applied to some of these images, but it is nowhere as close as we have seen OnePlus do it on their past phones, and unless you zoom in and look for it, I don't think you will have to worry about it too much, at least not in these bright lighting conditions. There is a bit less contrast in these shots, and the shadows are brought up a tad more than how I prefer my images to look, which makes some of the images look flat and adds grain or noise to them. Don't get me wrong, these images still look good, but I feel these slightly tweaked version of these images looks a bit better to me. Now when I'm adding contrast in editing, I almost always have to adjust the color temperature and white balance of these shots as well, since the main camera is not capturing accurate looking colors. There is much more warmth in most of its shots, which makes the colors in these images look a lot different than how they looked in real life. I feel this is just a white balance issue and can be easily fixed with an update. Last year, there was a cool tint on OnePlus 9 Pro's images, and some of you pointed out that the Hasselblad color calibration works only in the Pro mode, and that I should have clicked images in the Pro mode to get the best looking colors. So this time, I took the same shot with the normal photos mode and the Hasselblad Pro mode, and here is how both those shots compare side by side. None of these images are showing the actual colors of the scene, but out of the two, I prefer the colors coming out of the default photos mode. You might like the look of the images from the Pro mode, and that is completely fine as everyone perceives color in a different way. Whenever the lights are too bright, white objects in the shots are normally overexposed, but the main camera on the OnePlus 10 Pro is doing really well to capture all the minute details on this white flower. For this shot, there are a lot of elements which are brighter, and the trunk of this tree had a good amount of shadow on it. But the HDR mode on this phone did really well to bring up a lot of details from the shadows and preserve the colors of the bright sky in the background. So the HDR mode on this 10 Pro is doing a very good job. This one is a very impressive shot. There was bright sun behind the flowers, but phone did really well to capture enough details and colors in the flowers, and at the same time, it also managed to keep the background from blowing out. I know this is not a comparison video, but just to show you guys how good the HDR mode on this phone is, here is an HDR shot from this phone compared with the one from the iPhone 13 Pro. You can clearly see that 10 Pro did a much better job with the dynamic range here. Well, this is the case when the HDR mode actually works. I had it set to auto since it was a sunny day and most of the shots would require it to be on. As we saw before, it works wonders for the shot when it is turned on. But when in auto mode, this phone is not the best judge of when the HDR mode needs to be turned on. This particular shot clearly demanded the HDR mode. The trees are in shadows with the bright sun behind them. It did the same with this shot. More than 50% of the frame is filled with trees which are in shadows, so the auto mode should have switched the HDR on, but it didn't. Again, in these shots, there was clearly bright light outside, but again the auto mode failed to turn the HDR mode on, so these images didn't turn out all that good. So the HDR mode on this phone does a good job, but when you think that it is necessary, make sure to either turn it on yourself or just leave the HDR mode turned on for all of your shots. The main camera is very quick at setting the focus on any nearby object. This is important while taking close-up shots. As you can see, the subject closest to the camera or the one that I tapped on is in perfect sharp focus, and thanks to a wide aperture and large image sensor, the background gets a very nice optical blur. There might be slight focus hunting if the background of your subject is too bright. In that case, just change the composition a bit and that might help the phone to lock the focus. This phone doesn't get a macro mode, which is a shame since the macro mode on the OnePlus 9 Pro was able to take really good shots. If you are in well-lit conditions, you can switch to the telephoto lens or zoom in with the main camera and get away with a few very close-up shots. But this method is in no way a substitute to an actual macro lens. Let us now check out the images from other cameras on this phone. Here is how much of the scene the main camera will let you capture, And here's how much more the ultra-wide angle lens lets you get in the shot. In this particular shot, you can see that the ultra-wide camera is capturing better dynamic range than the main lens. That's not all. From the more options, you can switch to the 150-degree mode and capture even wider field of view. You can also take fisheye view images in this mode. It's a fun mode to use. The 150-degree images have distorted edges, and if you try to correct them, or if you want an image with lens correction applied, you end up with a normal ultra-wide shot. So other than for these two images, I stuck to the regular ultra-wide mode for all of my wide shots. This ultra-wide camera gets a 50-megapixel sensor behind it, but these are 12-megapixel pixel binned images. Even in that case, these wide shots don't seem to be all that detailed, and they quickly start falling apart even if you zoom 2 times on them. Well, to fix this, if you want detailed wide shots, switch to the high resolution mode and unleash the full 50-megapixel sensor for these shots. And now when you zoom in on these 50-megapixel wide shots, you will find them to be filled with a lot of details. As good and detailed as the 50-megapixel images from this ultra-wide angle camera looks, the aperture and lens optics in front of this sensor are not as good as the one in front of the main camera. So the images from the main sensor will always look sharper and crispier. You can take 48-megapixel shots with the main sensor as well, and you will see a similar kind of thing. These high-resolution shots have a ton of details, and you can zoom in on them way more than you can do on the normal 12-megapixel shots before they start falling apart. These shots, however, take up a lot of storage space, so unless you want to zoom in on a particular part of the image later on, I will suggest you to stick to the default 12-megapixel resolution for most of your shots on both the main and ultra-wide angle cameras. The third camera gets a 77mm telephoto lens, and here are its images. This lens gets OIS, which helps the shot look crispy and sharp. When there is plenty of light, these 3.3x optically zoomed in shots look pretty good. There are enough details in them and everything appears to be sharp. But this camera just gets an 8-megapixel sensor behind it, so if you zoom in even a bit on these images, the details will quickly start falling apart. It also gets a much narrower aperture, so it is not very useful in indoor or low lighting conditions. Let us now move on to the portrait shots. When you switch to this mode, the 10 Pro takes a bit more time to detect the edges compared to the other phones. The portrait shots look good at a glance, but if you look closer, the edge detection is not perfect and it is going to need a lot of help via software updates. As you can see in this shot, it completely messed up the fence in this part and also behind this other hand. There is an option to take zoomed in portrait shots, but it is not using the telephoto lens for this purpose. These are just zoomed in shots from the main camera, and while they still look good, there isn't enough details in them. The edge detection seems to be good and accurate for these portrait shots, but since the main subject appears a lot softer in these zoomed in shots, I would prefer taking wide portrait shots with this camera. I take a lot of portrait shots on my phone, so I really hope that OnePlus is working on improving the edge detection on this phone via software updates very soon. I actually got one software update on this phone in the last 10 days, but that update didn't seem to have fixed this issue, so maybe one of the next updates will do it. The edge detection does get a bit better when you're trying to take portrait shots of objects. Somehow, this phone finds taking portraits of objects a bit easier. That being said, although the edge detection is better, there are not enough details in these portrait shots for some reason, and even less in these zoomed in portrait shots. With that, let us move on to the images which I took in indoors and lower lighting conditions. A large sensor, optical image stabilization and wide aperture all help the main camera take good images as the light goes down. You will see a lot of details even if I zoom in on these shots. There is some noise in the darker parts of the image, but you won't notice it unless you zoom way in. For some reason, there is a weird shift in color when I was taking shots in artificial lighting conditions. These two images were clicked within a span of 2 to 3 seconds, and you can see a distinct difference in the way both of them have captured colors. I wish the camera was more consistent in these lighting conditions. The main camera does well to capture a lot of light and information in these shots, even in outdoor low lighting conditions. However, there is a lot of noise in these shots, so switching to the night mode helps take care of that noise to a certain extent. It also makes everything in the image appear a bit sharper. How the night mode works is it keeps the shutter open for a slightly longer time so the sensor could gather as much light as possible. But this also means that you will have to hold the phone steady until the shutter is open, or else the night shot will turn out to be all blurry. While this mode doesn't add a lot of light to your shots to make them look like they were clicked during the daytime, it still makes the shot look better and usable. You can switch to the wide lens in these lighting conditions as well, but it takes very dark images with very little information. You get a night mode for this lens as well, which will add a lot of light to these images, but these images are still not as sharp as anyone would like them, and there is also a lot of noise in them. So I find it best to stick to the main camera in these lighting conditions. That brings us to the front-facing camera on this phone. We finally have an improved 32 megapixel selfie camera with a hair wide aperture. OnePlus had stuck with a 16 megapixel front-facing camera for ages, so it is finally nice to get a bump in the megapixel count. There seemed to be a good amount of detail in these selfies and everything appears to be sharp. Again, the HDR mode doesn't always fire up when it is needed, so on more than one occasion you can see the brighter parts of the images being blown out. OnePlus really needs to work on the auto HDR feature for all the cameras. The edge detection seems to be good and accurate for most of the portrait selfies. In some of these portrait selfies, we see a lot of contrast which almost crushes the dark areas in the frame. Other than that, this camera does well to detect multiple faces in your selfies. All in all, I would say most people will be satisfied with the front-facing camera on this phone. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the OnePlus 10 Pro. You can see how it is handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I am walking around with it. Sadly, the maximum resolution for this camera is locked to 1080p. With that, we have seen over 110 image and video samples from all the cameras on this phone, and for the most part, I am pretty satisfied with the results. Now, if OnePlus could only fix the white balance issue and the portrait mode performance with 1 or 2 software updates, I wouldn't mind using this phone on a daily basis. This time, OnePlus did not overplay the Hasselblad card, and that kept my expectations in check. And in the end, I am pretty satisfied with the results which I got. You guys saw these images too, so what do you guys feel about them? Let me know in the comments. If you guys are looking to purchase this OnePlus 10 Pro, I will really appreciate if you get it from the affiliate links in the description section. That is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for a lot more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.